Hi, I'm Doris Purchase, and welcome to Beyond the Frame, a podcast created just for you by Propeller Art Gallery, artists empowering artists in Toronto. Together, we'll take a deep dive into the hearts and minds of working visual artists today and their practice. In each episode, you will hear illuminating and intimate explorations of all things art, and you'll hear it in the artist's own voice. We'll talk process, inspiration, challenges, and much more. Everything you've ever wanted to know about art making or about the artists themselves happens right here. So let's sit back and have a listen, shall we? Today we welcome Frances Patella. Which ism is it? Under which ism would you classify your work?
I suppose I would say realism, and I'm going to make up hybridism. I use photographs of real places and events, but then I also may add acrylic paint on top of the photographs. I also use double exposures, so my work may even go towards surrealism.
Who's your muse? Influencers, educators, mentors? Who has greatly inspired you?
I would have to say, first, Robert Rauschenberg. He was the first artist that inspired me to use mixed media with photography. Also, Jack Shadbolt, even though he is considered one of Canada's foremost painters, I actually discovered him through a book found in a very musty bookstore in New York City. The book was Active Art, and Shadbolt took images of Vogue models and painted right on top of them, creating interesting insect beans. Of course, David Hockney for his six-lens work depicting landscapes from 6 different perspectives at once. And my favorite, Joyce Wieland, whom I worked with as her arts administrator, because Joyce taught me how to have fun with art making. She was definitely irreverent, gutsy, and she also used lens-based and mixed media.
Materials matter. What are your chosen favorite tools and preferred medium?
I use primarily photography and acrylic paint. So, of course, my favorite brushes, I use sponges, rags, Q-tips, and gel medium. My favorite tool is a very old-fashioned carpenter's plane, which is a powering tool for smoothing a surface of wood. It's a tool that my late father gave me when I was in what they called a women's non-traditional occupation program at Humber College for carpentry and construction. I use the plane to shave off layers of photographs as I work on a piece. I build up surface with photos and paint, and then shave off certain sections, revealing some of the previous photos underneath.
Slump secrets. What methods do you employ to get yourself out of a slump?
Okay, I pretend that I'm not going to do any real artwork, just plain throwing some paint around, cut up some photos, paint upside down on a piece, using upside down photos, and before I know it, I'm in the zone. I've also used music as a Pavlovian trick to train myself to start working. I have music playing on a loop, and it used to drive my kids crazy. So my daughter downloaded all this new music for me, so now I have a bigger loop. And because I put down many layers, which requires time to dry, I have numerous pieces on the go. So if I get stuck on one, I go on to another. It's often when I give up on a piece that the magic happens because I have nothing to lose. And I will often ruin a piece on purpose, let accidents happen, and I'm content to let that be part of the process.
In the beginning. So tell me a bit about your process. Do you have a bag of tricks, lucky talismans, or habits? Where do you start? And more importantly, when do you stop?
I photographed the controlled burns and ruins in my native Italy, and I realized that fire was used in many countries to clear fields, smoke out your enemies in time of war, etc. For example, at Stonehenge, the visitor center explains how the Salisbury Plains were cleared using fire. So fire and ruins became my preferred theme in my work. When I discovered that the City of Toronto's yearly prescribed burns in Hyde Park, I was overjoyed. I got to know the people in the company, it's called Lands and Forests, who conducted the burns, and I basically would follow them around southern Ontario to photograph the different burn areas. I also go for walks in High Park, and I have been photographing not only the burns, but the red-tailed hawks. Since the burns are done to restore the native oak savannas, numerous indigenous species have returned to the park. I chase and photograph one particular hawk, the only banded hawk, and he has let me come very close to him, and that just really inspires me. I have been adding the hawk images in my work as well. So I'm interested in showing change over time. I start by piecing together on sheets of paper numerous photos of a particular area of the park, and it may take years to get all the images that I require of that particular ecosystem. Then I attach the photos on canvas or wood panel with acrylic gel medium, and I start to paint. I may add more photos, and if the work is getting too thick with images, I plane it down. I stop when I feel the piece is finished, sometimes days, weeks, and even years later.
Calling all emo. What do you wish people to think or feel when they contemplate your work?
Perhaps I would like them to consider space-time. I photograph specific places over a period of time. I often save film shot up at a particular location to reshoot later under different conditions in different landscapes. And these double exposures become transition points in my work. The smoky landscapes evoke a sense of mystery. I want people to be surprised by discovering the hawks or other animals and things in the trees.
The struggle is real. Talk to me about your biggest challenges as an artist. What methods do you use to overcome these challenges?
Well, I think the struggle for the longest time has been a lack of, time and space to do the work, and that's kind of a different type of space-time. The struggle is to juggle family, children, work, mortgages, etc. So that was kind of like a huge roadblock. In order to actually have an art career and do the work required, especially as a woman, I've had to use numerous tools and methods. I had a cleaning person and sitters when the kids were young, and I would pay for those services by conducting alternative photography workshops throughout Southern Ontario, on top of my part-time photography and visual art teaching job at the TDSB. I also used my carpentry and construction skills to invest in real estate with rental units and renovate them, which helped to pay the mortgage. Because let's face it, you don't make a lot of money doing art. Not many of us anyway. I built my own studio over my garage so that I would always have a place to work, especially when the kids were young. And it's only during this pandemic that I've had all this concentrated time in the studio.
Picture perfect. In your opinion, what constitutes a perfect piece of art? And what qualities in your own work would you signify as a perfect work? For example, perfect composition, confident brushstrokes illustrating a concept, or something else altogether?
Yeah, that's a tough one, as I don't believe in perfection. Perfection to me signifies a static state, whereas since everything is in motion or flux, how can you pinpoint one particular state? You can't, really. So I often rework my art by adding more photos or more paint to the work that I considered perfectly done. Composition and all the other elements are certainly important, but it's the work that makes me want to spend a lot of time looking at it or coming back to it over and over again, that I find new attributes the longer you engage with it. And that sort of stimulates my mind as well. That's what I would consider close to perfect.
Art Speak. How do you feel about titling, discussing, and explaining your work?
I wasn't very comfortable speaking about my work in the past, but teaching has enabled me to lose the fear. Teaching is a great way to sort of organize your thoughts on paper and communicate them effectively, or the students will let you know. And I've also been fortunate to write and receive grants, and nothing focuses your mind like grant writing. Sometimes I would rather stick a pencil in my eye, but in the end, it makes you really think about what and why you are doing art. Titling of individual work has become more of a reference about place and also playing with words and their meaning. Titling series becomes a bit more challenging. For example, for my upcoming show in September at Propeller, it will be titled Plain to See, and it's spelled Plane. Because as I chased the hawks in the park, I would ask people if they had seen the hawk fly by and what direction was it going. And often they hadn't even noticed that the hawk was flying right over their heads. And I would say, but it was so plain to see. And because I was using the carpenter's plane, that became the title for the new work.
Heavy metal or classical? What do you listen to while you work? Or is silence your thing?
I suppose classical. I have been listening a lot to Sigur Rós, and it's the Icelandic trio with their ethereal sound. That's according to Spotify. And they were also featured in a movie I just saw called Upside Down, about two worlds that were close but were upside down to one another. So I, certainly think, what, is this a coincidence? I don't know, maybe. So, because, I also work with upside down images, and I put my work upside down. I also listen to Laurie Anderson, Vampire Weekend, album Leaf. Yeah.
Why for art thou? Why do you make art?
I am an immigrant who came to Canada by ship when I was almost 5, and it took about 10 days. And my mother neglected to bring anything for me to occupy myself on the voyage. So I started to draw on family photos, and she wasn't thrilled. And when I started school in Toronto, I couldn't speak English, and at the time they didn't have a Learn to Speak English class, and I was just placed in a regular class. So I would draw to communicate. And art became a way for me to communicate, so it got hardwired. And when I taught photography, I had a unit regarding science behind light. And the students weren't thrilled, but it really opened up a whole new perspective for me. So photography and art are means to a voyage of discovery, so to speak. I also have a background in the historical photo processes like Gum Bichromate, where you mix light-sensitive chemistry with watercolor pigment on watercolor paper canvas. And as the print develops, you can actually brush away areas, and it can be very painterly. So the act of painting and photography was established early. And now it's a way to inquire, learn, grow, and be part of the community with really amazing people. It just basically, art allows me to explore the world around me. And I'm fortunate to be able to do it.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Frame, a PAG podcast. To hear more episodes and to view the artist's works, please visit www.propellerartgallery.ca. Hosted by Doris Purchase, produced by Tracy Thomson, and recorded at the Orange Lounge Studio in Toronto. Also, the Propeller Art Gallery recognizes the presence of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Huron-Wendat nations. We acknowledge we are hosted on land governed by Treaty 13, the Toronto Purchase, the Two-Row Wampum Treaty, and the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. We are committed to peaceably sharing and caring for the resources around the Great Lakes and operating the gallery on the principles of inclusiveness as we continue to exhibit art created by artists from all over the world. Thank you for listening.